Dear friends, thank you for supporting this channel on Patreon to join our growing family of donors, now 59 patrons strong. And remember, once we reach 100 active patrons, we will start sending out a 1-ounce U.S. Silver Eagle, autographed by your host, Dunnigan Kaiser, to one active supporter each and every month. Thanks for taking a minute to pitch in by going to patreon.com/ReluctantPreppers and pledging your support today. Thanks very much.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back to Reluctant Preppers. I'm your host, Dunnigan Kaiser. Today we are speaking, this is Thursday, May 24th, 2018. Daniel Ameduri is with us from Future Money Trends. Daniel, thank you for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
We've had you on before talking about the contrast between people who are trying to make preparedness steps to ensure against intolerable risk to their families versus still living an abundant life while we're waiting for the collapse. But if we could have you on to circle back with on what you're seeing currently as major trends happening affecting such things as geopolitical tensions, the U.S. dollar, the gold market, blockchain, and other emerging technologies. So if we could just start with your perspective from the people that you've talked with in finance and in economics and so on, people who are trend watchers, about what they're seeing in geopolitical tensions and how those are playing out in their effects on people's economic lives going forward.
It's interesting. The inflation that we've all been waiting for a good 10 years is really starting to pick up here. I wrote an article yesterday at Future Money Trends about the freight trucking industry, how there's actually a shortage of drivers where it's causing a spike in wages. You've got an increase in fuel costs, and then you've got an increase in the cost of goods. And you actually saw this in the recent stock down movement of General Mills, which is historically one of the safest stocks you can own. I don't think that thing's had a down year in several decades. And it's down 40% from its peak. It's down 28% year to date. And it's all because of the rising costs and the impacts of real price inflation. So you're seeing real price inflation. At the same point in time, you got the Fed in a rate hike cycle. Both of these factors are very, very good for gold investors and gold owners. The dollar had a recent, rally here, but it was essentially a bear market rally. It was a short squeeze, and I think that's done. It's behind us, so it'll go back to its trend, and it will make lows below the 90 level, and ultimately into the low 80s probably by the end of this year. I mean, we're looking at a dramatic move in the dollar between the tax cuts, which are a stimulus to the economy. So you've got that natural inflation, more money in their pockets. And then you have the deficit over $1 trillion this year. So I think the market seems to be blowing it all off, and it seems nobody's really concerned about a major correction or even a crisis. But I certainly think that's in the cards. This kind of reminds me of how 2006 felt. And I would say that's even true when you tie it into the housing market, because the housing market seems to be topping off here. We just had another month of impressive gains, according to the National Association of Realtors. But that was taking place in 2006. We all know how the next 2 years went.
We just had David Morgan on 2 nights ago, and he was talking about some of those common sense indicators that ordinary people, if you don't trust the government statistics, if you don't trust the mainstream media to tell you the truth about what's going on in the economy, he says just go look at your car dealers in your neighborhood and truck dealers and just look how many vehicles they've got stuffed onto their lots because the channel stuffing that's going on by the major manufacturers in order to make their numbers look good, but it's not really selling through in the economy. However, you're pointing out that there's areas where we're starting to see inflationary pressures, and he also talked about that. We also had Rob Kirby on talking about inflationary pressures. What about those geopolitical tensions, and how does that play out in terms of flight to safety?
I was very optimistic, as probably many listeners were, about what was going on in North Korea. Seeing the North Korean leader come down and meet with the South Korean president, and seeing that the U.S. president was going to meet. But as we do this interview just a few hours ago, President Trump has pulled out of that summit. I don't think it's totally, the window's not closed. If anybody reads that letter, it's definitely open to still having the June 12th summit. But the geopolitical factors, I don't think are being accounted for at all. When you consider what's happened in Iran in the last month with the U.S. pulling out of that agreement, with what Israel did not even 2 weeks ago, having some airstrikes in Syria, which killed some Iranian troops. Russia's involved. Russia, I just saw on Zero Hedge, one of their finance ministers came out and said that they were ready to ditch the dollar and go to the EU if the EU is willing to do those kind of that type of transaction, which I don't think they will be. But everybody is kind of very complacent here, and this is kind of when you want to start being a little more conservative, start cashing up, and be ready for either opportunities because of a crisis, or at least wait until trends are verified. But certainly, I think the market, probably because of what happened in the last 2 years, people tend to make their next decision based off of their most recent experience. And the recent experiences, you always buy the dip. The recent experiences, and no matter what the news is, the market's going to go up. That's where we are. Again, it goes back to that. It feels like to me as an investor that we're in a 2006 like state. The investors and are pricing things in. I mean, you have gold barely sitting at 1,300 here. It's a very low level, in my opinion, versus all the different black swans that are around us and the potential for a crisis. Now, I'm not an advocate of going all in on gold, but certainly, you would think that more institutional investors would follow a guy like Ray Dalio's lead, or Stanley Druckenmiller, where they're starting to purchase sizable positions in both the GLD as well as the gold mining stocks, the larger companies.
What do you say to people who claim that for years, in fact, with apparently the powers that be in the Western world keeping kind of a lid on precious metals prices and diverting people's interest or attention from them towards the record-setting Dow and that sort of thing? In contrast to that, we've seen from China, India, Asian Rim nations, Russia, central banks, and others around the world purchasing gold hand over fist, supposedly. Do you see that we're the last, that the Western world is the last to the party here, but is there still time for people who want to position themselves ahead of a potential significant move in precious metals in 2018 to take those positions up now?
I think there's plenty of time for the average guy, the average retail investor. The United States still has on record the largest holding of gold. So perhaps we're not last to the party. Maybe we were really early and we're first ones there. We still have a lot of gold, and we don't know how much gold there is. A lot of people say there's no gold. But typically when there's a consensus out there, it's usually the opposite. So I've never heard anybody say that there's a lot more gold at Fort Knox than there is, than they're reporting. And that could be, we don't know. We honest to God just don't know. Now, could Trump restructure the debt and perhaps sort of, they've talked about a gold standard, and Reagan did a commission on it. So I know Trump loves to mimic Reagan, but, as far as the Western powers manipulating gold and keeping the price of, I don't think that's going to stop at all. I think they want to make sure, just like they want to make sure you're not saving money in your bank account and you're buying stocks, they don't want you owning gold either. That's a sovereign position for an individual, and they don't want that. They want you buying stocks, or they want you buying bonds, or whatever vehicle it is that the financial industry is pushing. And I don't really like to compare gold to the Dow because it's not fair. Dow is comprised of producing, growing businesses. The gold is better compared to the U.S. dollar or any other fiat currency. That's an apples to apples. That's money to money. Warren Buffett recently talked about how $10,000 in gold would have been $400,000 from 1964 to today. If it was in good quality stocks, it would be, I think it was like 57 million. It was some crazy number. But look, that's not a fair comparison. The $10,000 in 1964 is just $10,000. It can't buy you that much. The $10,000 in gold is now $400,000. Gold's doing its job. Gold's job is to hold value, preserve value. It's not to grow and compound. That is the job of a savings vehicle, with a yield or some sort of business that you're investing in. But I think the actions of the East do show you that gold is still king. It does have a significant role, although the reason this has gotten delayed and postponed is because the system as it is right now works for everybody in power, and that it includes the Chinese. It's not as simple as just the Chinese are just going to turn on the US dollar and collapse it. You have to remember the US is a consumer of Chinese products. They're able to manipulate their currency down because we have the reserve currency. It wouldn't work for them if we didn't have the reserve currency that they could then take and use for whatever consumption they want. So right now it works for everybody in power. So I think it's either going to take market forces at some point in time, and we don't know where that is. We know Japan has a debt level of 250% thereabouts versus GDP. We're just at like 105%. So we don't know how long this could go. 20, 30 years. I'm not predicting that, but certainly everybody that's in power wants this to maintain. They want it to hold together. But I think it is prudent of any investor watching what China's doing, or Russia, or even Turkey. They're purchasing gold because they know that as much as they want to keep this system together, it can't stay together forever. And I think everybody should look at it the same way. You should own some physical gold and silver, not because you think it's going to go radically up, but because you have to just kind of, I don't want to say this is a no-brainer on this, but it is. This is not going to last. And I think anybody who's under 80 years old is absolutely going to see this unfold in our lifetimes. Unfortunately, for a person like myself in my late 30s, I've got 3 young children. I'll be honest with you, not only do the powers that be want this to maintain, people who hate the system and see all the fraud and lies like myself want it to hold together, because I don't want to raise my kids in chaos. I don't want to experience all the nastiness that will come with some sort of global financial reset.
Yeah, you had spoken with us. The first time we ever had you interviewed was in person at the Liberty Mastermind Symposium. After that, and you talked to us about make your preparations and then live your life. And it's how do you go ahead and live a semblance of a normal life and try to really appreciate each moment and appreciate each day and appreciate those irreplaceable, those priceless times that we have together with our loved ones now. I know even Chris Duane from Silver Shield talks about almost living in a what did he say? A reminiscent or nostalgic. He says even now he has current moment nostalgic feelings about the present time. Meaning there will come a time when we'll look back and see these as days when life was simpler or life was easier. Even no matter how hard it may seem right now, we really need to appreciate these moments that we have. But take advantage of them also to make preparations along. But not let that completely dominate your consciousness to where you don't take the time to appreciate the moments with your family. And you mentioned in passing there gold mining when we were talking about gold, and we had Frank Holmes on recently from Hive Blockchain, and he actually has made a major transition. I don't know if it's a transition, but it's actually opening up a new chapter in his entrepreneurial way, as he talked to us about seeing a need and then responding to it by creating a new opportunity. So he saw that as with a lifetime of gold mining financing and records in that industry, he's now mining Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies. So you, Future Money Trends, can you talk to us about these major trends that you're seeing in the role that you believe that blockchain and cryptocurrencies are beginning to play and are going to play in our future? Because there seems to be often like a big divide, like dividing the Red Sea between people who are really advocates of physical precious metals as the ultimate, not having a counterparty risk and that sort of thing, not requiring trust in a system, that kind of thing, versus people who are saying, no, you got to understand the advantages that blockchain brings that we've never had before. This is a real game changer. So can you weigh in on that? Do you see those complementary, or how do you see so that people can understand, is it a both and scenario going forward with changes that are coming?
Look, I'm very excited about the blockchain myself. At Future Money Trends, we covered it in 2012 as just the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and Litecoin. But I always wanted there to be a publicly traded vehicle. And in my opinion, the company that Frank Holmes put together, Hive, was the perfect vehicle because it mined the not Bitcoin. It will mine Bitcoin in September, the largest Bitcoin producer in all of Europe. But It mines Ethereum, it mines some other cryptocurrencies, and it hoards them. And I love that model, and it was a perfect fit. So I would say this to everybody: look, if you're interested in cryptocurrency, I would take your time, learn it, expose yourself to a little bit of it. Over time, accumulate different coins. I would start with Bitcoin. It's the only decentralized, truly decentralized coin. All the best manpower, the best brains, they're all on the Bitcoin project. So I like Bitcoin I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist, but I certainly think Bitcoin is the core token you should own. What is its role? I don't know. That's a tough question. So the blockchain, what's very exciting is I'm actually, there's companies that are going public soon that they're going to be introducing, just like Kodak was using a blockchain. They're going to be doing that for all the companies, for IBM, for ExxonMobil. There's companies that are going to be helping all these companies adopt the blockchain. So the blockchain is going to be something that will be around. It'll be just as common as the internet or email in 20 years from now. As far as the cryptocurrencies, I think the cryptocurrencies have to survive the fiat crisis. So I don't know what the fiat crisis can happen 5 years from now or 10 years from now or later this year. But if Bitcoin is around in 5 years, which is going to be an easy accomplishment for it, or around in 10 years, it will definitely be considered a store of value. And I think it's already it's seeing mass adoption right now. It is being used as a store of value. I hate the fact that it went parabolic the way it did last year. It's such a disservice because it wasn't mass adoption for Bitcoin being a utility as currency. It was just speculators jumping in and people who never heard of the cryptocurrencies, buying it at 15,000 because it was going up and everybody said it was going to go to 50 grand. So I think Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies have a very bright future. Though they're extremely speculative. I don't think they replace gold. I don't think they even replace Visa or MasterCard right now. This is going to take time to play out. I know everybody's excited, which is great, but it's going to take some time to play out. And I don't think you're really going to see Bitcoin take over until you have a serious crisis in currency.
Just on the point of minimizing an individual's risk if they do want to dip their toe into the crypto space, people who say had an affinity to physical storage of physical precious metals, that kind of thing. Some people have talked to us about that you really can, pretend you do own a Bitcoin, for example, that you can print out your public key on archival quality paper and store it in a safe or that kind of thing. Do you see, or a hardware wallet? I think Jerry Robinson from Bankruptcy of Our Nation has talked about that from Follow the Money. Do you see people actually having those kind of options to basically, like you say, something that can really survive the system because it's really outside the system if there is going to be a fiat collapse? Are there any particular aspects of that you think people should consider?
Well, certainly holding your cryptocurrency outside of the banking system and outside, which banking system is Coinbase, and then outside of even a computer that has access to the internet. My Bitcoins are not too far from me, but they're physically stored. And I do believe in that people should do that. They should take their sovereignty and store those cryptocurrencies in a safe place. And the cryptocurrencies that could be, tied to some sort of application, that would be cryptocurrencies that you're going to use to spend. But if you're not spending them, you should really take them out and store them. I think the Winklevoss twins actually have them to where they printed it and shredded it, and it's stored all different kinds of places. But for the average person listening to this, and it's like, oh, this is a headache, this is complicated, honestly, either don't get involved in them at all, buy Bitcoin, or look at something like what Frank Holmes is doing, where you can just buy a publicly traded vehicle. The smartest people are running that company with Genesis Mining and Marco Strang. So, I think that's the better way for most people to do it. And again, if you don't understand it or it's complicated, you can go to futuremoneytrends.com/block. We have reports on how to buy Bitcoin step by step. But overall, I think people are probably, if you get it, you're going to find out how to do this properly from listening to interviews or reading manuals, on the internet. There's so much free content out there for the last 6-7 years from the Bitcoin enthusiasts. But if you don't understand it, don't feel like you have to be a part of it. You can simply own some gold and silver. You can own some Hive, and you can just, you don't have to be a part of every investment out there. It's not a do or die. I don't know why people get so hardcore on Bitcoin that you absolutely have to own it and everything's going to implode all around them. Look, I don't even know if people want their national sovereignty. I think it's going to work really well for wealthy people and really well for libertarian-minded people. But for 99% of the population, in my opinion, they don't want national sovereignty. They want, when somebody steals something from them, for them to call up Bank of America, put in their claim, and then it's Bank of America's problem. Bank of America refund your debit card, or American Express refund your credit card. I don't think most people want their financial sovereignty, their monetary sovereignty. So for most people, I don't know how the adoption is going to look over the future, but I feel like a lot of people are being pressured into this, and I think people should, if you don't get it, you don't want it, don't do it. You don't have to. There's a lot of people who I know today don't use email. They get by just fine.
Yeah, a lot of I think our audience is not typical in that they really do, by and large, believe that when the crunch time comes, Bank of America or whoever it is might not be there for you and might have some force majeure reason why they can't make you whole again, if you can even get them to answer the phone. So there's other trends you study at Future Money Trends. What other maybe one thing comes to top of mind that we haven't talked about that you want to make sure that people are at least aware of so that they can check into making some considering opportunities that may exist that you see as a major trend going forward?
I think the cannabis space, I was torn. I was like, do we go with green energy because it's got market forces, government forces, or cannabis? But I think cannabis, the cannabis investments right now that are out there, most of them are very, very risky. And out of over 200 publicly traded companies, only 2 are actually making money. So it's a very risky space. Pretty much everybody's making money in the cannabis space through the attorneys right now because nobody knows what the regulations are. It's a real mess. But that's okay. I like being in messy situations because you have to be a stock picker. You have to partner with the right people, the right companies that are going to be serious players. But I think this is going to be very mainstream, if not already mainstream, for everybody under 40 years old. And there's a real profit opportunity on this. We're seeing some very good numbers out of Colorado and Las Vegas. Canada will fully legalize it as of July 1st nationwide. So I think the cannabis sector is probably the sector that I'm most excited about in investing because I think it's something you can position yourself in now. And it's one of those things over the next 3 to 5 years, whether, the dollar collapses or doesn't collapse. I think the cannabis people are going to make a lot of money along with the alcohol industry.
Yeah, it's interesting because from a independence and self-reliance and preparedness and kind of opting out of the system standpoint, it was interesting because our inclination here at Reluctant Preppers was always kind of at arm's length and pretty standoffish towards the whole cannabis industry because generally not being in favor of things that are going to be likely to increase the rates of chemical dependency or issues with social problems that might stem from that. And yet at the same time, we have our sister channel, HealingYourself.life, where we talk about either natural or herbal remedies so that you don't have to pay these ridiculous patent medicine prices to the drug companies for these dangerous drugs that are more likely to hurt you than heal you, and being able to opt out of where you can do things that are more based on the wisdom of nature and tradition to keep yourself well. And when we started learning about some of the pain relief that's available and some of the stress relief and that kind of thing that come from some of the management that can happen through either CBD oil or other cannabinoids, we were like, wow, it's a very interesting. It makes what I thought was a open and shut discussion into one that's a lot more interesting. So I think it's worth people finding out more about it.
Well,
We do see that trend is moving forward.
can I just say something?
Go ahead.
Okay, in 2012 when it went legal in Colorado, think about or maybe might have been 2010. But anyway, think about if alcohol had just become legal and all of a sudden there's all these car accidents and there's all this domestic violence. There's people going to the emergency rooms because they've got alcohol poisoning. How fast would the society would have said, see, we told you so. Alcohol is dangerous and we got to make it illegal again. But with cannabis, it became legal in Colorado, and you didn't get a single one of those stories. In fact, alcohol sales went down, so less people are doing alcohol. DUIs have gone down if you look at the numbers. Violent crime is down if you look at the numbers. So with cannabis, it's the exact opposite. With alcohol, people are out at a bar, they may get in a fight. With cannabis, they just want to get on their couch and go to bed or watch TV. And I didn't try cannabis in my teens, and I didn't try it in my 20s. I didn't try it until I was 32 years old. Didn't think much of it. Fast forward like 3 years later, I tried it again, but this time instead of doing it through an pen, I ate it with a gummy. And my honest to God experience was that, man, I'm a wine drinker, and I didn't really think that it had much of a different effect. The only difference was I didn't have any of the carbs or calories. I didn't have a stomach ache. I didn't have to spend a fortune to have a relaxing drink in the evening. The cannabis was much more pleasant, and the best part about the cannabis is within 3 or 4 hours, it was completely gone. I was back to 100%. So now one thing I worry that it's thinning out my hair, because all of a sudden I started trying it again over the summer, and coincidentally I started losing my hair. So hopefully that's not related, because I think I'm just gonna have to start wearing hats, because I really do enjoy the cannabis.
How does in your dad or your grandpa or in your family, how does that usually go with longevity of having a head of hair?
That's the problem. Everybody's got a full set of hair. My grandfather, my father both passed away. A full set of hair on both sides of the family, and out of nowhere, I went to Vancouver in July and I started doing cannabis, and all of a sudden I noticed my hair was falling out. So I don't know, maybe it's that. But I also, in the same point in time, in your healing channel, would love this. I was told that I had such severe arthritis as someone in my late 30s that I would have to get some sort of knee replacement. Yeah. And I would have to start doing these cortisone shots and take all these prescription drugs. I started taking a ton of turmeric, boswellia, ginger, and white willow bark, and my knee pain is completely gone. This is about 6 months now. So about the time I started doing the cannabis, I started doing all these spices. So I'm like, well, I can't give up either one of them, but one of them could be causing me to lose my hair.
That's very interesting. Well, Daniel, we are out of time, but it's been a great visit, and we'd love to have you back again here with us. If people want to find out more of your work on Future Money Trends, where can they find you?
Just go to futuremoneytrends.com. You can contact me in the contact area. I will respond to each one of those. I'm even available for phone calls. I love talking to people about this stuff, as well as we have our free weekly wealth digest if you subscribe at Future Money Trends.
Thank you, Daniel Ameduri from Future Money Trends, for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers.
Appreciate it.